Hey everyone, today is Wednesday, the 30th of November. Today I'd like to share a little bit of a book that had a significant impact on me when I was studying in college. It's A Theory of Justice by John Rawls. This is his revised edition. He passed away in 2002, and this came out in, I think, 99 or some such. Yeah, 99. But originally he wrote it in 1971, and the reason there's a revised edition is because he had modifications to make to his thought process over the last 28 years. So, and people made fair points. So what I want to read is just part one of chapter one. Chapter one is entitled Justice as Fairness. Part one is called The Role of Justice. I figure, seeing as all these issues, I suppose, with the police are cropping up, this is mildly appropriate. But also, I've been wanting to do this for a while because this book is helped to form my thought processes on the fact, and I feel that it's a good way of spreading the word. I mean, the only other way you could do this is by reading Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, especially Aristotle. If you read enough Aristotle, you'll believe you can get as close as possible to an actual definition of justice without actually getting to it. Justice is an intangible, like good, evil. I mean, you can point at something and say, that's good, that's bad. But it's very tainted by your own perception. There's, what is the ultimate good? What is the ultimate bad? What is the ultimate justice? Those sorts of things. And these are things that we can't define by example. We can only define by example. We can't define in words because the English language isn't prepared to define such concepts. Really, from the perspective of thinkers like Aristotle, words like justice and good and evil can really only be defined, purely defined, by the creator of such terms. And so that's like God, basically. Essentially, that's the way Aristotle viewed it, I think. So anyways, allow me to read a bit here. It's not especially long, and no, I'm not reading the entire 47 pages of the chapter. I'm reading essentially 1, 2, 3, I can't turn the page, 4 pages, tops, and I go pretty quick, So the role of justice. Justice is the first virtue of social institutions, as truth is of systems of thought. A theory, however elegant and economical, must be rejected or revised if it is untrue. Likewise, laws and institutions, no matter how efficient and well arranged, must be reformed or abolished if they are unjust. Each person possesses an inviolability founded on justice that even the welfare of society as a whole cannot override. For this reason, justice denies that the loss of freedom for some is made right by a greater good shared by others. It does not allow that the sacrifices imposed on a few are outweighed by the larger sum of advantages enjoyed by many. Therefore, in a just society, the liberties of equal citizenship are taken as settled. The rights secured by justice are not subject to political bargaining or to the calculus of social interests. The only thing that permits us to acquiesce in an erroneous theory is the lack of a better one. Analogously, an injustice is tolerable only when it is necessary to avoid an even greater injustice. Being first virtues of human activities, truth and justice are uncompromising. These propositions seem to express our intuitive conviction of the primacy of justice. No doubt they are expressed too strongly. In any event, I wish to inquire whether these contentions or others similar to them are sound, and if so, how they can be accounted for. To this end, it is necessary to work out a theory of justice in the light of which these assertions can be interpreted and assessed. I shall begin by considering the role of the principles of justice. Let us assume, to fix ideas, that a society is a more or less self-sufficient association of persons who, in their relations to one another, recognize certain rules of conduct as binding, and who for the most part act in accordance with them. Suppose further that these rules specify a system of cooperation designed to advance the good of those taking part in it. Then, although a society is a cooperative venture for mutual advantage, it is typically marked by a conflict as well as by an identity of interests. There is an identity of interests since social cooperation makes possible a better life for all than any would have if each were to live solely by his own efforts. There is a conflict of interests, since persons are not indifferent as to how the greater benefits produced by their collaboration are distributed, for in order to pursue their ends, they each prefer a larger to a lesser share. A set of principles is required for choosing among the various social arrangements which determine this division of advantages and for underwriting an agreement on the proper distributive shares. These principles are the principles of social justice. They provide a way of assigning rights and duties in the basic institutions of society, and they define the appropriate distribution of the benefits and burdens of social cooperation. Now let us say that a society is well ordered, when it is not only designed to advance the good of its members, but when it is also effectively regulated by a public conception of justice. That is, it is a society in which 1. Everyone accepts and knows that the others accept the same principles of justice, and 2. The basic social institutions generally satisfy and are generally known to satisfy these principles. In this case, while men may put forth excessive demands on one another, they nevertheless acknowledge a common point of view from which their claims may be adjudicated. If men's inclination to self-interest makes their vigilance against one another necessary, their public sense of justice makes their secure association together possible. Among individuals with disparate aims and purposes, a shared conception of justice establishes the bonds of civic friendship. The general desire for justice limits the pursuit of other ends. One may think of a public conception of justice as constituting the fundamental charter of a well-ordered human association. Existing societies are of course seldom well-ordered in this sense, for what is just and unjust is usually in dispute. Men disagree about which principles should define the basic terms of their association. Yet we may still say, despite this disagreement, that they each have a conception of justice. That is, they understand the need for, and they are prepared to affirm, a characteristic set of principles for assigning basic rights and duties, and for determining what they take to be the proper distribution of the benefits and burdens of social cooperation. Thus, it seems natural to think of the concept of justice as distinct from the various conceptions of justice, and as being specified by the role which these different sets of principles, these different conceptions, have in common. Those who hold different conceptions of justice can then still agree that institutions are just when no arbitrary distinctions are made between persons in the assigning of basic rights and duties, and when the rules determine a proper balance between competing claims to the advantages of social life. Men can agree to this description of just institutions, since the notions of an arbitrary distinction and of a proper balance, which are included in the concept of justice, are left open for each to interpret according to the principles of justice that he accepts. These principles single out which similarities and differences among persons are relevant in determining rights and duties, and they specify which division of advantages is appropriate. Clearly, this distinction between the concept and the various conceptions of justice settles no important questions. It simply helps to identify the role of the principles of social justice. Some measure of agreement in conceptions of justice is, however, not the only prerequisite for a viable human community. There are other fundamental social problems, in particular those of coordination, efficiency, and stability. Thus, the plans of individuals need to be fitted together so that their activities are compatible with one another, and they can all be carried through without anyone's legitimate expectations being severely disappointed. Moreover, the execution of these plans should lead to the achievement of social ends in ways that are efficient and consistent with justice. And finally, the scheme of social cooperation must be stable. It must be more or less regularly compiled with and its basic rules willingly acted upon. And when infractions occur, stabilizing forces should exist that prevent further violations and tend to restore the arrangement. Now, it is evident that these three problems are connected with that of justice. In the absence of a certain measure of agreement on what is just and unjust, it is clearly more difficult for individuals to coordinate their plans efficiently in order to ensure that mutually beneficial arrangements are maintained. Distrust and resentment corrode the ties of civility, and suspicion and hostility tempt men to act in ways they would otherwise avoid. So while the distinctive role of conceptions of justice is to specify basic rights and duties, and to determine the appropriate distributive shares, the way in which a conception does this is bound to affect the problems of efficiency, coordination, and stability. We cannot, in general, assess a conception of justice by its distributive role alone, however useful this role may be in identifying the concept of justice. We must take into account its wider connections, for even though justice has a certain priority, being the most important virtue of institutions, it is still true that, other things equal, one conception of justice is preferable to another when its broader consequences are more desirable. If you're sitting there going, I don't know what the hell he just said, that's okay. It is complex. And right off the top of my head, I cannot tell you exactly what I just said, because I have to go through it line by line and say, okay, this is what this means, and this means, and this means. And I highly, highly, highly recommend you get your own copy of this book, because it is fantastic. In places like, I use the word ensure instead of insure, because I'm not entirely sure insure is what he meant. I think he meant ensure, but I don't know. I think he's British, so that might cause a problem there. But basically, we're people. We all have our different perceptions of justice, and we need to agree on a bigger view of it so that the little things can be handled on a case-by-case basis as opposed to everything being handled on a case-by-case. If you get what I mean? I'm not entirely sure if that's specifically what he meant, but books like these are up to interpretation. This is a textbook, after all. And a theory like this needs to be taken in its totality, not in small bits. And that was just a small bit. So, if you want me to do more of these, read more of this, please leave comments below. Like it, whatever. I don't care. Just let me know somehow. Also, let me know how my speaking voice is. And I'll leave it until next time. So, until next time.